This concern for the future, and you mentioned something about trusting human nature. There was a value in her ethic, her work ethic, where she did all of these great things and influenced all these great people and had all these interesting ideas because she had a basic trust in human nature, and that made her approachable and easy to talk to. So I'll ask you to start, but maybe all of you have some thoughts about her trust in human nature and what you think, how you benefited from that trust that she had. So Len, I'll let you start with that.
Well, when we talk with Mary, I think we mentioned that there's an air of confidence, fearlessness, and I think to me she has this vision of what is right and the confidence to go forward. And I talk to my students that way, is that if you go to class or you take this class or a program of study, you don't want to just go and get a C or a B, and if you're fortunate, get an A. You need to think about the product of what you're getting in terms of education and training and where you're going. And I think Mary is just a great example. Her air of confidence is beyond most people that we know. But what I would want to respond to you, Rick, in terms of the issues of ethics, is that very recently I talked to a person about marketing. And one of the things that he mentioned to me is that it's important to brand. And so if you say something, and if you say, Consumer Report said that, well, immediately you have credibility. But if you say, something else, brand X that never heard of, well, you have to prove yourself. Well, Mary has this history and a track record to do the right thing. And this is over time. This is not just 10 years, 20 years. It's much more than that. And when you talked about social networking, he pulled friends together who could have the branding for different components and put them all together, and it becomes a project that has a vision that she knows it would work. She's confident it's going to work before it even got started because she could see through the various processes that go from A to B. And so from that standpoint, I think we all learn from that. And we hope perhaps we could, or our students could, be something like Mary in the future. I mean, she's really is a guiding light and a very much of an exception compared to regular people. She's not regular people at all.
I would like to speak on the issue of her fearlessness. And, I spent a lot of time with Mary, particularly at the end of her life. Mary was very fearless because she was such a great believer in God. Yeah. She really believed that God was guiding her in everything that she did. It wasn't that she had faith in her own willpower and her own effort. She had faith in God. She knew that if she was about doing the right thing, that ultimately she was going to win. She knew that along the way there were going to be obstacles, but her feeling was that if you were doing the right thing, you don't have to be afraid. And she had a genuine confidence that if you're doing the right thing, ultimately you will win. You might lose a few battles along the way, but ultimately you will win. I'll never forget the time she was telling me about when she came up with the idea of the minority fellowship programs, and she came up with the idea of that there should be PhD researchers in nursing, psychiatry, psychology, sociology, and social work. And she was working at NIMH at the time. And she thought she had pulled together a coalition of people who would help her go to the director and convince the director to set this money aside because it was so important. She had all her statistics together. For example, I remember her saying, you know, in nursing, when you put together African Americans, Asians, Native Americans, and Hispanics, there were only 56 nurses who were minorities who had doctorates of any kind, not necessarily research doctorates. So she had pulled together all of her colleagues who she thought would go with her to the director, and she said, they all said, oh, Mary, yes, we're behind you, and we'll go with you to the director, and we'll make the argument. And she set up the meeting, and they all said they would be there. And the morning of the meeting, she said, all of them called her and says, no, I changed my mind. I don't think I want to be involved in that. It ended up, she was the only person of 5 people who had promised to go with her, who showed up to make this argument with the director. And she won it. And while other people thought that the director would not go along with her, would not set aside this money for those minority fellowship programs, by herself, in the meeting alone, where there were supposed to be 5 other people with her, she convinced the director to set aside this money. And I knew one of the persons who was her boss at NIMH, who was the director. And this person said to me, Aura, the biggest problem I had with working with Mary is that she never followed the rules. If the rules were in her way of doing what she thought was right, she just ignored them. And she just did what she thought was right. But bottom line is she did what she thought was right, and it was her sense of doing the right thing and that she was doing the work of God on earth that made her fearless.
Wow. Well, you know, it's gratifying to hear. I mean, I get inspired just listening to all of you because I remember many conversations with her as well over the phone and by fax. She didn't use email, as you said. She would send her fax. She probably burned out 3 or 4 fax machines in a year, but she'd send these faxes saying, Rick, you need to do this, or J&J needs to do that, and okay, Mary, and I'd call Rick, Rick, we got to work on rural caregiving, we got to do something in mental health. So you're right. It wasn't that she didn't take no for an answer. It's that she didn't let the rules get in her way, and she acted with courage out of some conviction that what she was doing was right. And it is powerful to hear.